So move your bones so that you feel the shape of your bones sitting in front of your bolster. So you have your bolster set up, tipped up on a blanket or a towel. You have a flat height on top of your bolster for your neck, and that could be something that you kind of curl under your neck today. So as you are sitting in front of your bolster, so you have that sacrum pushed up to it, kind of notice the broadness of the bolster, and it's not exactly the size of the sacrum, right? That they're supported. But what I want you to do is take your belt first, buckle it up so you've got a loop that's substantial enough. You could easily bring it over and around your waist. And then when you reach it to your back, you might kind of shift your ribs and then shift your knees outward. So the feet are together, the soles together, the knees open. And then scoop up your feet with your belt. So when I scoop them up, my knees tend to go on alert, like a little bit of hyper motion. I think part of this is, the nervous system, the constant kind of dialing into a ramped up response. So feel when you put your belt to the top contour of the legs and back around to the eyebrows of the buttocks, even a little lower is okay, as long as you're not sitting on your belt. And then place some blocks under your legs. Okay, now if you have a sandbag, we're going to use that in the beginning. So as you lower down your waist backing, so the posterior core, get that feel of how just the muscles in the front of the body may kind of push forward and lift, and feel if you can allow that space to release back in time, right? Give it some moments, position your blocks so they give you the most leg muscle guidance to feel the legs shifting a little bit open, but not so harsh that the inner thighs are tightening up with the position of the block. So what I feel is if I put my knees too far out, sometimes that feels a little bit more comfortable than if I put the block so high up, it's really guarding, then my leg inside's kind of gripped. So kind of feel both of your orientations, block contoured or higher or flat, and then shift so that you have a sandbag up where the ribs intersect and where that flow of the rib expansion is provided by the position of the sand. It's kind of interesting. The sand has some reasoning beyond that it's pushing down on you, which could feel a little bit uninviting for some of us. So consider that when the sand is across, there's a broadening and a lateral movement of the ribs, but also it places some attention to your thoracic chamber as well. Okay, let your arms simply move back behind you so that you can feature reaching them independently, and then use that opportunity when your arms are back to maybe adjust your blanket under your head. Maybe it's too much, maybe it needs to be a little bit more underneath your neck to the top of your shoulders. I want you to adjust it so, if you need to adjust it, and then reach your hands around to your elbows. Okay, give that a try. If that's a bit much, you can also interlace your fingers and reach the inside of the hands as they turn inside out behind you. Okay, so you can turn your hands inside out and push back, or hold the elbows. Okay, now guide where the momentum of the inhale, so the diaphragm is in that descending mode, which naturally lets the abdomen expand. The belly will naturally expand in that shape of releasing, but also asserting the movement of the diaphragm, pressing down to the abdominal organs. Breathe in through the nose. And then as you exhale, you'll feel naturally the diaphragm relaxing which is when the belly moves back towards the spine. And my hands get a little bit loose with holding the elbows. They're sliding out into the forearms, but I still feel that reasonable cross-sectional pulley of my ribs. It's pretty gentle. It's not magnified, but I do feel that movement of my arms motioning back to balance out the breathing patterns through the intercostals. Now we're going to move our arms so that they center open and they have some moments before they touch down. So as you create that balance of the chest opening and the arms lowering down, this is particularly important, especially if you have any interruptive noise. There is a noise outside of the space right now. I can tell working noise. Yard work, working noise. So if you hear a little bit of a strong buzz, hopefully that will go away. But as we use those awareness tactics of filtering the focus into our breath and through the inhale and back to that belly naturally expanding and feeling the abdomen descending and the diaphragm actually ascending up towards the heart and lungs. And just noticing this experience, because in the present moment, it is unique, right? It will change when we change our shapes upside down and so forth, how the diaphragmatic breathing is challenged and strengthened. So we're always working towards some sort of strengthening respiratory experience. And part of that would be to calm the nervous system. So with a few more breaths here, if you can feel where your feet touch in together, I want you to let the thigh muscles maybe inch out and down a little lower. So you'll slide your hands down to the blocks. If your thighs were positioned up, you're going to turn the blocks so they're lower, setting. And then as you feel the knees move down, you know, it's maybe not the knees that you feel, it's the muscles that are above the knees. So these adductors, as you mature, you might notice, well, is it my hip flexor? Or actually, is it some of the adductor tissues that are the guarding tissues for our nervous system, right? That are a little grippy. So try to let those spaces internalize the shape and the support, and let the arms get a little bit more cozy beside you, palms relaxed, fingers curled in. Feel that in breath as the belly expands, and the out breath as the belly draws towards the spine. Take about 4 more layers of these slow. And as the breath is slow, can you let the exhalation go about 2 times longer than the inhale? So simply lengthen. Inhale, and then even more the exhale. Now setting yourself up to shift the belts. First, start to slide the feet closer towards the center, to your center. And then if you can either slide the belt off the tops of the feet, sometimes you get lucky and you don't have to unbuckle it. But then as you guide your knees to point up, I want you to actually move the belt away. So I've got it buckled and through. I'm just going to unweave and take it away from under my back, sliding it out. And then push down into my feet, walk them a little closer towards me, slide the blanket on top of my bolster back, And then I want you to lift your hips. I know you got sand, some of you, on your ribs. If you don't, or you want to remove it, that's fine. Lift up the hips and slide a flat block, low height under your rear. And then you're going to stretch your legs down and put the sand on top of the hip frontal bones, okay? So the knees, try to bring them towards each other so they're almost being managed by your muscular attention. Since the muscles were flailing out in that guarded zone, you might find some new muscles here. So flex your feet, good. And then reach for your belt and take it overhead. So I'm going to encourage you to grasp onto the belt, opening out the chest. The belt could be in shoulder width, it could be slightly wider. You decide, but reach into your heels and feel where your muscles are engaged. Is it the legs? Is it two parts of the legs, around the knees, around the ankles? But see if you can work so that it's a force field of kind of one zone, like it's reaching open with the arms and straight down the chute of the body, into the feet, into the roots. Now let go of your belt. Bring your arms together so the palms are touching overhead in more of a prayer position. Feel how the inner arms have sort of a similar awareness of the inner legs, right? We did this earlier with a leg part. And we won't put the elbows out to the sides like we had foot prayer, but get a feel of the arms trying to reach over, but use the reach to engage your ribs. If you're all about the shoulders, the arms, the muscles, feel if you can work that midsection. And then bring your arms up towards the ceiling, straight down to your sand, and remove the sand. And position your feet to slide in, knees about hips distance. Push down into your feet to move your block over to the left. Now, as you start to go into this hip crossover, your hips lower all the way down, rear on the floor. And then use your hands beside your hips, push down into your elbows slightly so you are using your back core muscles, and then move your right knee in towards your chest and lift the foot and cross it over to the left knee. And then we're going to tilt our left thigh over to the block, or if you happen to have a grippy ball, you're going to place that beside your left thigh and let the body lean into that ball or block. And hold the right knee with your left hand. Hold it so focused that you do engage the outer, that lateral rotator of your right leg. And I would imagine your left foot is not very grounded. It's kind of spinning onto its side. It's probably not spinning, but it does kind of rotate and open the bottom of the foot a little bit. Send your right arm back besides your head and maintain that balance into your right hip. If it feels like, ooh, not balanced, but a heavy pull into the fibers of the side of the leg, that's where we're aiming our focus here. Good, so keep with that programming of holding your knee and actually pulling it a little towards you. So managing that awareness through that right hip, feel a pull. Okay, now mentally feel where it is exactly positioning in your hip. Like, do you feel it at the connector into the pelvis, or is it more into the leg? Right, so it's either going to be pelvis into the back, or it's going to be from the pelvis to the leg. And so noticing that, so you can have a little comparison experience on the next side. Let's move our knee back open and give a a block to it. So I want you to push it with the block. It could be one hand so your other arm is relaxed. But this attachment place at that top of the thigh, that root of that side of the pelvis, likely got kind of, you know, nerve-wise, a little bit fried in that last position. So see if you can kind of get it down to a simmer there. And then maybe use both hands, maybe that engagement of both arms, pushing. Now I'm not attacking my knee with the block, I'm not hitting it with the block, but I am trying to get a little palpation with that inner thigh tissue with the block, that right inner thigh. So just give a little bit of touch and go. It is touch and go in there. And notice if your inner thigh tissues are as guarded and grippy. Maybe it's part of hip flexor stuff for some of us. So I would do a little bit of information gathering for this beginning part of the session. Now I want you to switch sides, but go into this palpation on the second side in the beginning. So uncross right foot down, lift the left knee towards the chest a little bit, cross the left ankle to the right knee, and then place the block at that left inner leg first, okay, before we cross it over. But just be here with this, noticing if you're sliding down your bolster, you might need to push yourself back up. And if you decide you want your blanket under your head and you're missing that, you can always get that back under your head. There's all these little prop things that are coming up. It's called prop yoga, okay? So pushing with that block, find a trigger point, right? You might even have long enough arms that your elbows could be on this block, so it's less shoulder pressure. Try to get your arms really connected to your body so there's less tension building in your shoulders. And then I put the ball over next to my right buttock, right? It's a little bit higher than the leg itself, right at the top of the outer right thigh. And then as I lean my right leg to that ball, or you could use a block, putting that other block aside, hold on to the left knee, and then engage that exterior left thigh. It could be easier if you start with the palpation. Remember, it's all a little bit of exploration. But when you're moving your leg across, are you guiding it across town, across your pose, or are you drawing the knee towards you? Yeah, just kind of get a feel of the coordination of breathing and the movement into the abdomen, expanding and contracting. Now 10, 15, 20 seconds into it, you might feel like I've done the stretch, right? That's some of our mental states of doing what's on the list for the body, but trying to give the body some time to actually soak up and integrate the poses. That's a real important thing. We may have a long list of poses and I may get through 3/4 of them, and that's okay. So if you need to kind of fidget, move along, that's up to you, but we're going a little bit slow pace here. So if I feel my hand hold on to that left knee, I want you to let the weight of the back of the body really get heavy into the props in the floor, especially the rear, and then start to slide your hand away from that left knee. Now we're going to come across and we'll take this left leg, your left leg, uncross, but put that left foot next to the right foot. So it's the right foot is pretty much down, the bottom of the foot is downwards, but you're just going to roll to your left side, okay? And you're going to roll to a bolster near you, and turn it so it's onto its horizontal zone. And now we're going to set up, we're going to do a kind of a two-featured phase here between side sage and some cat-cow and dog pose and so forth. So I want you to prep your platform prep or foundation prep. So if the knees are feeling like a little bit vulnerable here, I would put a block or a ball on the inside of the right leg, and it could be thigh or it could be the knee that gets the support. You know, I find that once I get into the shape, I think it was the knee that needed the ball or the block, and then it ends up being, I maybe needed it a little higher. So that's going to be this hip flexor zone, and I want us to get into the ball or block on the inside leg because we just stretched the inside leg and we were working in the side of the hip. Okay? Yeah, I'm kind of just holding time here to explain, but when you have your blankets or your towels on the other side, you want just enough space between for your arm and maybe an inch or so above the arm, but it's not overly empty of a space between the bolster and the blankets. Okay, we'll move that along in time. We take a sandbag if we have one, and then once you get there, then you gotta get it back up. Okay, sand is optional, we all know. Block is sometimes critical for us to have overhead. So I'm going to put my hand onto that block, and as you're lengthening through that side feature of your body, filter the awareness here with the breathing apparatus so you expand with the ribs. And if that's interesting to you, to explore this side beam of movement of the rib cage, you might put a sandbag on the ribs. It's up to you. If you're pretty good right now, if you need to straighten your leg, that's okay. Either leg can straighten too. So if the knees are feeling a little bit too much compression by bending, just kind of fluff it up a little bit. Let the leg give a little bit of open space. And then the technique with the breath is to have moved from the belly breathing to the costal rhythm, the intercostals, the muscles between each rib. Since we have so many ribs, right, then we have so many thoracic vertebrae that's all connected to each rib, right? I mean, each thoracic vertebral piece, right, has a rib. So when I let my head roll a little bit back, I feel more comfortable. Now, some of you might want your blankets a little higher, depending on how this is responding in your neck muscles. But it's important that your head can be relaxed. So if it's kind of holding on the left or right side of the neck, bring some awareness to tune into the neck, fine tune your shape so that your breathing within the shape can be refined. Yeah, it's not how many shapes we're going to peel out here. It's each of the shapes, so hopefully you like them. Hopefully you're okay with some of these shapes. You can always shape shift to what's to your delight as well. Now it's different if my head is right on the side. I do feel a little different in my arm muscle on that right arm than if I roll onto the back of my head. It's a little different in my neck. But I would encourage you to take just a few experiences of rolling on the side of the head and then to the almost to the back, almost to that occiput, so that you get a little bit of experience of your upper back muscles, your trapezius, right, into the neck, having some experience of movement, even in the still shape. Okay, give a few more seconds. Really work on that reach of the right arm, that stretch through that right thigh. Expand. Now we've done one side only. Okay, so in between these sides, we're going to do a full pattern of movements, right? With our hands, knees extending, and then kind of put it all together. So give yourself a moment here to bring your right arm open. If you have a sandbag, I want you to slide that away. So it's on the floor beside you. And then doing any habits you have to turn into the bolster, turn into a bolster. And then as you bring your right knee to the left, you're going to rotate. And I want us to have a blanket under the knees for this. So, you know, unless you're on a super padded floor, might as well have the height because it will bring your knees a little higher. And that might be cushioned to your hips. You just don't necessarily have it for just that the floor is firm. It's also lift. It's a lift. I'm going to keep the block behind the other side since I'll use it on that other sage. But here we are. We got a blanket at the top. Now I'm looking. Maybe you're turning the other direction. I have a feeling in your screen view. But put your bolster on top of that blanket on the other side. Take the knees into a wide stance. And we're going to work with a kind of core back construction project here. So I have my hands, since it sounds like construction out there, I feel like I'll do that. So hands are forward from my shoulders. And I'm going to round my back so it's almost that cat shape, upper back position, chin tucks towards chest. Now, fundamentally, feel where your neck moves. It only has so much flexion, thank goodness. And then I want you to let your head tilt back forward and then look towards your bolster and let your tail reach back. So you really feel your tailbone like a hook. And then as I stretch the arms here, this is where you might want a block under your forehead. It doesn't work without something, right? You need something under your forehead so that you can still have that arch through the spine, but not holding your neck. If you don't like the block, you can use maybe a sandbag and or a towel set, but you'd have to go shop in the house for a towel set. So the hands are on the bolster. I've got my hands pretty wide. Okay. Now keep that width experience with your hands. Now round your back so you are rounding into cat back. Head on the block. Slide the hands off the bolster down so that their hands are closer to you but next to your bolster. And then fingers open, hands on the edge of your mat, toes under. Lift up your knees and stretch back to downward dog, but take the momentum that you're starting to create in your back. It may make sense the second time around, but first time, just go into downward dog, take things shape, and feel the sitting bones lively, and oh, the legs are stretching. Okay, you might need to walk out your legs, pedal through for a few. Keep the knees in that kind of juicy space of bending and almost straight, right? So it's not hyperextending, it's bending and almost to a straight bone, okay? Now, as you lower your knees back down, take your hands onto your bolster and then head back to your block and be, okay? Notice if your brain is getting really heavy in the pose. So if your head feels like the most weight that's experienced right now, your work is in rounding your back like cat shape with your head on the block, and keep the arms in a position that's comfortable for you. It might not be hands at the edge of the bolster. That might be too much strain on your shoulder. You might need to walk your hands in and let your elbows bend. But we're trying to get the back of the rib cage here, the back of the lungs, where most of the lungs are, well, at least almost 70% of your body are in your back, right? To get those fired up here. Okay, now round your back to cat, and then hands on the floor, wide as your mat. Round your back this time, chin tucks to your chest, cat back, hands on floor. And then inhale, arch, knees stay down. chest forward. Inhale, lift up your eyes, do a little eye stretch, tail stretch. From cow pose to cat. Okay, one more time. Inhale, cow, arch the spine. Good. Keep that positioning of reach through your spinal column. And then as you get that motion through the vertebral column, that fluidity, this next time I want you to reach back to child's pose. I know some might have the knees wide, toes touching. Shift your hips back to your feet. If this ain't working for you, this is too strenuous on the knees, keep the knees a little bit higher, bring your hands up onto your bolster and your forehead back to your block. Okay, so you can still work the child's pose without knees getting any damage. Okay, and some of us sitting back is comfortable. We don't seem to think it's bad, but you might find it works for you now, but it could be a little bit gritty on the knee at some point. Might not happen. So if you're good, it's completely fine. Stay with that fine experience. Seems like a good tactic. Okay. Now as we come up, I'm going to push my block off to the side and then bring the knees in. And if your bolster is too close to you, just push a little forward here. And you're going to come to an up dog. So lengthen the front. There you go. From the hip points to the belly. And if you can be with it for a little bit, stay. Now, if your wrists are complaining, but you still want to stretch your belly this way and your wrists are hurting, what you'll need to do is put your bolster under your waist. Okay. So those of you that are okay here, I want us to stay at a good number, another 30 seconds. If it's too much into your wrist, just turn your bolster and then come into this. And then you might find, oh, this is a little more relaxed in my wrists. That's good. So finding that experience of length versus tugging on your lower back muscles. So I'm trying to encourage you to use the bolster. I find it helpful. It's a little bit more complete of an experience in my musculature versus straining, but they're both taught. Some just like to have more strain. Okay, now when you come back, depending on your position, you're going to come back to dog pose one more time to get into Uttanasana, standing forward bend, which is a little different than dog pose. So walk your feet a little forward, meet your hands back to your feet. So walk on back with the hands to the legs. You can drape over in standing child's pose. Let your arms dangle from the shoulders. Or you can hold your elbows with your hands. Make that platform out of your feet. So think of your feet as your base. And the heels are reaching back from the toes. And if they're not doing much of that and you feel like they're just two bricks at the bottom of your legs without much enervating quality, I would recommend to walk the toes up on the blanket and then let the heels descend off the back. Even though you're still really plugged into your feet, it feels like there's different parts of your foot. Like, oh, it separates. There's a little more enervating quality in the calves. So give this a few moments here where we're feeling the movement and the elasticity of the back muscles. Right? Changing gravity's pull on the legs and basically reversing the flow of gravity to the heart and the brain. It's a different inversion though than when we have our legs up, isn't it? Because it's still an inversion, but it doesn't reverse gravity's downward pull on the vital organs, right? This is more the cardiovascular inversion, right? For the lungs, the heart, the brain. They're all good. This is more of your face feels like it gets the inversion, right? The skin cells revitalize. So give a few more, and if the feet up on the blanket is just getting a little bit challenging in your calves, just slide them back to the floor. No big deal. If you're going to muster through it, then feel the flow of weight forward in the foot to the roots of the toes. If it's a painful experience, though, please come out. Feet are flat. Okay, but if you can stay with that pattern of sensation, this is good, right, to stretch our feet. They're just so small with so many, different bones and pieces to them, right, hands and feet, that it's good to stretch them out, because they tend to be just kind of one slab of movement during the day, right, a foot, a hand. So when you slide your feet back for certain, I want you to do any roll up that works for you. So it's just going to be simply a little bit of a roll up. Now your blood pressure drops in that last pose, so you're usually a little cooler. So then when you come up, you feel some warmth go right internally all the way up. And then when you come back down, I want you to let your arms dangle and then feel that ritual of the spacing of your feet, maybe step them a little wider. And then as you kind of cower over your legs, let your hands relax, bend your knees, okay? And then feel the weight of your upper body go a little forward, hands on the floor. Help yourself brace your way back to all fours, feet back, hands forward, knees down. And then we'll take our bolster in center. We'll scoot off our blanket and then put those blankets on the other side, okay? And then we'll go to side sage on the left, right hip down. All right, looks like we're in the program. So, still together after all these years in our Zooms. Okay, hopefully to look back at it. All right, so when I have my right leg drawing towards my bolster, I use this right leg to kind of move away from the left and then start to manipulate the sensation. If my right leg did not move away, I think it wouldn't be quite as effective here. Okay, so getting into your side sage, you've got your sand, you've got your blankets, and you've got another side to your neck. So I'm now noticing one side, it's different, when you sleep on one more than the other. There's different flexibility patterns in a neck. It's a different arterial flow on one side to the next. So on your right side, right, you might feel like that side has more space, right, in the organ world, right, internally. So it might be a little easier for your lower side to feel this shape in comfort. You can check it out and feel just to be, but stretch your left arm overhead. And that could be in any variation, right? It could be to your block, right? You could tilt it up if you would like, so you have a little bit more height underneath your hand. But as you explore that delicate range with your hip, I have to admit I like to put the sand in a place on the side bones that feels like it's gradually giving more stretch to it. So it's kind of on the edge of the hinge of my hip. But if I was to practice a little bit more conservatively, I might put my sand on my side and inwards. And that could have some deeper support for me, even though it feels a little bit more easy. Might be the best route, right, for restoration, okay, because it is opening up those spaces. So let's come into side sage, however it works for you. The ball might be on the inside of the left knee, it may not be. You might explore with how you bend both knees or how you straighten the right leg. If you've got enough space around you, go for it. And then the weight of your head, if you've turned to the back of your head or you're rolling down to the right side of your head, feel those mild turns with the head and the neck. I think that's an important place to get small, regenerative movement. Just gradually feel. Your head move. And make it really slow. Or don't move it at all. Okay, now can you let the breath ripple through the ribs? So you have this ridge, kind of the rib ridge ruffle, right, of the movement of the breath. Rib ruffle would be the word, probably. Rib ruffle would be the phrase. Okay, so before we exit this part, I want you to try to get your breath to be equal timing on in and out breath. If this is not interesting to you, you can just listen and let that whole experience pass by. But it might at some point be important to work on the measurement of in and out breath. This one is a little harder to do, exhale longer. So if you're able to do that, go for it, but it might just be easy enough to do equal ratio breathing. 4 count in, 4 count out, or 3 if that's easier. Okay, now as we start to focus on these motions of creating balance between the phases of poses, right? So we're going to move back out of the shape. We're going to take off the sand. We are going to use this rib, kind of the rib case, and we're going to change this, the kind of the plates of movement of the ribs, because that is kind of like tectonic plates, right? Kind of removing this rib platform. So I want you to be careful when you guide it. So you want to turn towards your right, bring the left knee to the right knee, and then rotate. It's a slow stuff, huh? And then take off the one blanket, and you have one flat. Well, it's not really flat, is it? You know, some of you might like your blanket to not be this high up, this quarter fold under your head when we're on our back. So if you do want a little flatter, you can always push it all the way out to length. But what I'm going to have us do is go from this turn and then pull the bolster into the center of your mat. And then we're going to lie back on the bolster. So I want you to sit onto it before you are on your back, so that my tailbone is close to the center edge of the bolster, right? It's kind of like I'm going to actually try to flip back off my bolster anyway. Okay. Flip out. Got your belt. This is important. If you've got one of the blocks nearby, just so you know where your things are, is helpful. And when you lower onto your back, you're going to need a block or a ball. Okay, so when you lower onto your back, your knees pointing upwards, take that position to notice the knees pointing up versus into your chest. Okay, place the ball or block. I'm trying to think what is the best object if you have two choices here. You know, it might actually be, I think they're both pretty good. I'm going to go with the block since it's universal that we have them. But if you have a ball, you can try that. We're going to do elevated reclining twist. So I have my knees to point up. This is challenging for me. I want to pull them into my chest. So I would encourage you to put your finger pads, or the, actually to me it's kind of the not the tip of my finger, but my finger anatomy. I'm going to have to figure that one out, huh? So I'm holding the top of my hip bone here with my fingers, trying to keep it centered so I'm not pulling my knees to my chest. So if it grips and it shortens, that means your knees are going to your chest. That's not what we're doing. So make sure those stay open, and then bring your knees to the right. So those areas stay open at the front of the hip bones, and they go to the left. And I want you to kind of coach the hip here for a few moments before you let your arms fling open, that your knees are pointing upwards. They can try to go a little bit away from you,
and your knees are going to go side to side. I'm encouraging you to try to get the knees to go pointing up or a little bit forward away from you. You'll start to feel this apparent, maybe in the hip and the side of the hip into your back. So keep going side to side and go at your own range. So if you want to kind of dip down a little farther over, kind of tipping a little bit off the bolster, that is fine. But you want to stay with your pelvis in the center-ish of your bolster. Okay, now can you squeeze onto the ball or the block? If you're curious about the ball option, you can always swap it and just get a feel. Is that better for your hip? I'm preferring the block because I know kind of where the hip joint is moving here. So when you're moving side to side, I want you to give it a pause on one side. So keep going. If you're going right, stay to the right or left, whichever side you're on is fine. But I want you to keep the knees moving over and keep them so they're moving a little more downstream them up, then up to your arms. Okay, you might feel the external hip here. And it's probably pretty internal, but it might not be mentally framed that way. Now with that top leg trying to kind of push into the lower leg or to the block, you're going to squeeze the block or the ball and then bring the knees in center. And squeeze that so your back, your lumbars are able to have a spacer. Now this can be helpful sometimes to make the block wider. That's the nice thing about a block, you can widen it. So I just kind of notice that. All right, if I bring the block a little wider, there's more spacing in my back. It's very simplified architecture work, right? If I put a spacer there, it's likely going to put some spacing in my back too. Hey, I like space. Anything where I get a little more spacious, I'll take it. Okay, now my knees are over to the other side. If you haven't gotten there, go. If you feel like you're kind of holding in space, you need something under the knees, you can always put a block. Or if you have a ball, whatever's closer, whatever you're not using that's there to hold that. And then we'll move our knees back into the center line and take a hold of that block or ball, move it aside, and then I want you to bring your knees towards you. Okay, so you're kind of the opposite, right? And if you can find where your sand is, that would be good. If you're not using sand, you'll be in upward facing forward bend without one, right? That's fine, but you're going to bring your legs so that they move towards your chest. I put sand on my back of my legs, a little bit higher than the rear, right? So they have a platform to be, otherwise it would just fall onto the floor. And if you have sandbag handles, you can adjust it so it's good. But the lower back flesh is able to release. So this is child's pose really on the back, it's similar. And the legs could be a little bit up. That's kind of nice because if you don't want your knees to be in this type of pressure, you can let them flow slightly open. And you might put your fingers behind the knees and just kind of notice, do you got some space back there, you guys? Is there some tension in the bones? It's pretty interesting to come to a practice, and occasionally you go through phases of poses and you can feel those shapes and feel how the muscles hold awareness in them. So just kind of check that out, whether you're touching into the bones, trying to feel a little bit more space. Now, I don't have to have a sandbag for this one. So if you don't have a sandbag, you're still here, right? I hope. Take the sand off, bring the left leg straight down, and then take a belt. Okay. Yeah, don't get too sleepy in this. You have to find props over and over again. So you're going to take your belt and place it under your right foot And the left leg can be reaching down with a sandbag on top of the thigh. You don't have to have a sandbag on it. You might be happy just with the belt under your foot and pulling on with both hands, right? Both hands are holding the belt. So when you're developing this stage of movement habit with your right leg, I'm going to give you these two choices with the belt loop. So you're going to buckle it up, and there's two options. One is to place the belt so it's behind your occipital ridge, right? So I would have the belt as wide, it's a big loop, right? The loop is wide, and it would be able to touch easily towards my face and then actually beyond, right? So there's a lot of looseness and space there. But then I can bring the belt to the crown of my head, and then I would use the knee bending and that resistance, lift my head, and then scoop up my brain a little bit with my belt, okay? And it might be helpful for you to think about that as it's your brain that's being held, okay? It's a brain holdup. Now I take my stance on my left thigh because it was easier to do it after I got my leg connected. If you don't want your head in your belt, that's okay. You can bring your hands to the inside of your belt, place the belt loop so it's between the thumb and the index finger, right in that webbing, and then the hands are naturally together that way, palms touching, in prayer position, and stretch the arms overhead. That's a decent measure of sensation in my leg with the hand hold too. They're just different, aren't they? So you'll find one that's the most polite for your neck muscles, your arms, which feels correct for you. And let the weight of your sand really surrender into that left leg. If your foot is starting to turn out, what you might work with is to step your left foot a little bit out so that there's possibility that the toes be a little bit more upwards than spinning outwards. Yeah, if it doesn't work with your leg straight down and it really flops out, try putting your foot a little wider. Another thing you can do if you have two belts for that issue is you could put a belt under your left foot and then hook it around your right thigh, right? So you keep the left foot straight up. Okay, that's one other way. So as we lengthen the back of the right leg, go into the shape. If you have the belt to the back of your head, notice the range of awareness. Your leg does not have to be this way. If you don't like the sand on it, bend your left knee and go into the pose that way. It might be more pleasant some days to take the bent knee. Okay, so with that medley of breath at the diaphragmatic, expanding the belly, diaphragm descending, and exhale, feel the belly draw towards the spine. Good. Now, just when you thought this side was complete, we'll just take a moment to feel where the leg is lifting, the right leg. Yeah, if it feels like it's controlled by the belt, that would be helpful to notice. You want it to feel like it's basically innervating the leg, right? The circulation, the arterial flow back to the heart. It's certainly a little bit more cardiovascular of a pose than most, right? Because of how you put your leg. So that's why inversions, right, are similar to their cardiovascular supportive shapes. You can either go upside down or you can go for a quick walk or a little of both. Now when my hands are going to reach to my belt, I'm going to slide it from the back of my head, or if I have my hands holding, I'll simply bring my foot forwards. Now if you have sand on your left leg, take it away. Bend through the left knee and switch sides. So push the foot forwards, push feet forward into the belt. And then as you switch it through, good. You got that right leg coming back down now. Now it gets to go away. And it was inverted for so long, you might take a moment to notice. Sometimes you'll notice things like slight things like temperature and the foot and the leg. It's just the more aware that you might be of your leg, or the more OCD you are of your poses, one or the other. Now, as you lower your right leg down, it's maybe different to shape it. Okay, so you'll take your belt behind your head, or take that belt into the hand pressure together straight up. Okay, and then moving that belt to where you want it. Brain float, arm float, and then add your sand. Now this side could feel a little bit more snug on the back of the leg. If it's tighter on this leg, you're going to need to loosen up your belt. It's likely different. So we're trying to balance out the tissues. No requirement that your leg has to be a certain amount of flexibility, right? It's about experiencing the balance through the structure. So let's take the experience of that leg pushing into the belt. But it's through the foot, right? It's kind of interesting. It's like the belt could not be through the whole leg. You might put, it's at the one spot that's working the whole leg. You might put your left hand, snug it into the very top of that left thigh, and kind of notice that muscular engagement there. If it's pretty twanged up, right, if it's very rigid, ribbony, you can go side to side through the tissue and it's kind of snarled up. I want you to bend the knee a little bit on that left leg and get a feel if you can lengthen at your sitting bone, which will probably bring your leg closer to you, or bend it, or your head lowers farther back. Okay, so it's about lengthening. Even if you're already hamstring long, we're working on the pelvic floor and the awareness in how you grip in here. So some of us have, well, everyone has some sort of things that occur in pelvic floor issues, but hypotonic, hypertonic, prolapse, those things. So we want to use our inversion, the opposite of prolapse, so you don't relapse into that issue, right? So feel where the weight of the head is in the belt. Don't worry so much about chin pressure. Focus on back line lengthening. Okay, so I'm going to push my belt a little higher up on the occipital ridge. And then I'm going to take my sand off so I can feel a little bit more of this back of the left thigh lengthening. And then arms open, maybe, if you've decided you can let go of any activation techniques with your hand. And then get a feel for maybe your head lowering down. Good touch to the blanket, you know. Okay, now bring the hands to the back of your head. If you've already have your hands in the air, you're going to slide your belt away for a moment. Bring both feet up into your belt. It's kind of fun to cross the legs if you haven't done this pattern before, where you have that kind of simple right leg crossed over left leg, like you might do if you're sitting down. You don't do this often in the air. And then hold the belt so it's about shoulder width with your elbows pointing outwards. And then when the foot pushes out into the belt, push out wide and have this Upavista pose, Viparita Upavista Konasana. And as the knees are bending, real important that they're not trying to twist in. So I want you to notice if the knees are twisting at all. No knee twists. Twist-free knee. So we will be doing some seated twist soon, but I want you to kind of set up the pattern so that the knees have no twist in the kneecap. You're in an injury-free zone right now, so try to make that habit. If you touch on your knees and you kind of feel circulation difference on each side of the bones, just feel a little different, or one's puffy, one's not, that kind of thing. Really let this next couple of minutes flush out the legs, right? So reversing that sluggishness, that stagnation, and the fluid retention that occurs from standing. You can't get away from it. Okay, now bend your knees. We're going to take legs up. So sandy feet or simply Viparita Karani without sand, that's fine. Bend your knees. Now, let's say you don't use sand, and you might have your hands holding your belt right now for this whole time, and then bring your belt over your face, have your hands together in that prayer position. Those of you that are getting your sand in your feet, go for it. I know a few aren't, so this would be a nice modification. My feet are supported so I can keep them upside down, okay? If you're gonna go with the sand, first you gotta find where it went. And then you can establish your sand on your belly. Do a couple belly push-ups with breathing. And then put your sand, if you haven't already, on your feet. You can do belly push-ups with your sand on your feet too. Okay. So a few more moments on our bolster like this. Feel where your pelvis is. If it's in a sense of a lot of workout in your back muscles, you can always nudge it a little forward. It's okay. You don't have to have it so that your tail is at the edge of it. Where I'm showing, it's pretty much far over. So there's more opening of my lungs. There's a little more of a back bend that way. Arms in cactus, unless you're holding your belt. Let the legs generally flush out. The flesh, the lymphatic drain. Right, reversing gravity's downward pull on the organs. This is what is happening here. Good. Now, if you're not using the sand, you still have that flush occurring through the legs. The sand just speeds it up. Right, per second, you're getting a little bit more directional pressure, right? Opposite of prolapse is certainly happening now. Right, the pelvic floor has a different flooring in it. It's not dropping down, right? It's going back to the center of gravity. The pelvis is our center of gravity. Now do a couple belly push-ups, right? So you really focus on that expansion of the tummy. And then feeling when there's that completion of the diaphragm actually ascending, but that's the direction of it moving down completely towards the floor of the body, the spine right now. Now creating that wave of sensation in your calves, flex the feet. Yeah, notice when you bend the knees and your hips have that reverse lift, right? You're gonna move the feet. If your hands are overhead, slide them a little down so you don't drop your sand on your hands. But you'll move your sand off your feet and then hands to the bolster and then gently push the bolster forward so it's no longer under your back of your pelvis. It's not under you anymore at all. So the bolster is in finger's reach. Okay. Now everyone's length is different on their legs, on their spine. We're all just different with the proportions of parts. So for me, having my fingers touching my bolster might work great, but for you, it might need to be farther forward for you to get a bridge pose. So feel where your feet are underneath your knees. And I want you to be able to feel that your feet are under your knees to lift up your hips. So when I lift up, I'm going to have to use that momentum to lift my hip bones up to bridge pose. Likely the blanket is not a very helpful thing to have under your head, even though it's kind of cozy. It's not the best for the cervical flexion. So as I move my blanket back, I'm going to lift up my arms and place them on the blanket. It's kind of perfect. And then keep that lift in my hips. So now I'm continuing that inversion. That's the nice part about this, is now you're in Setu Bandha, right? Sarvangasana. So this is prep for shoulder stand, always is. And then bring your arms forward and down, spine down to the floor. Clearly the spine's got to go. Spine's got to go. Take a few drawbridges at your very own pace and feel the motion through your spine. Maybe you can focus on the motion through your shoulders and that ripple down through your core. So alternate lift and lower, pushing into your feet, lifting through your hips, managing the circulation in your shoulders. And then spine centers all the way down to the back of your pelvis. And then you have that gentle arch through the spine. Let's do one more at least. If you need to settle, you can bring your knees out, feet together in Baddha Konasana if you need to take a breather here. And then as I lower down the spine, I'm going to encourage you to take a balance here of your arms out, windshield wiper the knees, keep the feet on the bolster. And as the knees tip over side to side, our spine has done half of this direction, but now we're going to do the full spinal twist. Okay. So what I want you to take is the direction of your bolster to be to one side. So we'll choose the right side of your mat. So push the bolster with your foot or your feet to the right side. Get your blanket under your head all the way to your shoulders likely. And then when the right leg stretches down, I'm going to kind of look over to my bolster and notice, well, it's away from my mat, so I can get a nice stretch for my whole outer left thigh. But I want you to have it far enough over to the right that you actually have to reach your back muscles to get the back hip muscles to get the leg over. Okay? So play with this. I want to give us a little bit of workshop time on this rather than doing a whole bunch of poses ahead. I think we're going to basify this right now, just simplify it, okay? So when you cross over that right to the right side, I can tell my knee doesn't touch my platform because it's off of the bolster. The bolster's down away. So I'm going to actually slide the bolster up so it completely supports my leg. Okay, add your sand to the exterior left hip. I got to get it together there. And if you have a ball, you're going to place it at the sacrum, or a blanket or a block is just fine. Stretch the left arm open, but just kind of practice the pause here before you feel like you've got the pose. Notice all the adjustment pieces, but we're trying to learn our twist so that we're moving from the center piece of the body, but each little kind of wave of energy, the fibers, right, of the ribs are actually also stretching open. It's not just like, oh yes, I feel my hip. That's a hip stretch, but it's It's like a full body. The whole body feels kind of like it's shifting open. You know, things have to kind of spread out before you find your center. You kind of have to lose it, I think, too. So feel where the arm is open, maybe just the left one, and then roll your head maybe to the left, maybe keep it centered and up towards the eyes towards the ceiling, or closing your eyes so that span in the brain can relax. Spend the energy on the breath of movement of the ribs. I know I noticed that the hip doesn't have a rib cage expansion opportunity. There's not like, there's in your ribs and your lungs, and that's so close to your shoulders. I think that those areas can be effective on opening the chest when you're breathing wide in your ribs and your chest muscles, affect your shoulder muscles. But you know, the hips and legs, the hip flexors, the rotators in the leg, you know, they kind of hope that the upper body has enough oxygenation that you're going to be able to get energy to loosen up and release tension enough inside, right? Internalizing that with your breathing experience to calm down so the hip can let go. That's a whole other experience, right? Getting the nervous system so calm you can have that occur. So give it a few more moments. I promise we won't add on too many poses here. Keep it simple. If the left inner thigh is really grippy, get that sand on there. If you don't have sand, you might spend some energy getting a bag of rice or something. If it's not this time, maybe next time. But it's good to have that weight on the exterior leg. It also gets you to stay with it for a little longer. Even if you pretend to stay with it, you're maybe mentally not in it, right? If you don't have that weight on the leg. You breathe deep, fill the lungs fully. Expand the belly. Exhale, bring it back to the center line. Can you bring that breath back to the center without trying to stiffen up the tummy? Find it soften. And then we'll move the sand and we'll take our way to the next side. And your way might be to move the ball or the block, bring your knees, tuck them into the chest, circle the knees, massage the outer rim of the sacrum, both directions. Right, you might do a little bit of a tantrum and shake the legs. And then we move the bolster with our hands or our feet to the left side. And then we take the second side, not too far away from the first side so that we're not in shock between the sides, having one done and not the other. One correction and one not corrected. Yeah, check it out. So place your sand on the exterior leg. The second side, you may already have enough agreement on how you're moving your pelvis, your ribs to align. Now, final pose here. We'll do one more for relaxation, but I want you to get this one in so you can feel that exterior hip and noticing how much you move your lower body to get the twist, and maybe how restricted the upper body can be. So if you're feeling a little tight in these areas, hip or shoulders, let your breathing exploration help you loosen up tension. Right, there's no guarantees, but getting enough support under your body from the props, that includes the blanket under your head too. And that includes the ball at the sacrum. The little things that must be missing item here. And at this stage, you might be wondering, is this all the props I need? Starting to get accustomed to this many Now, if your head is rolling to the right, feel the encouraging direction of your neck. If it's a fresh way to turn your neck today, especially on your back, it's nice to just enjoy that sensation through the neck. And now with the head turning back into center, you're going to start to move your body weights, right? The sand. And then when I move the sand aside, since that kind of couples into relaxation, we'll do a short elevated leg position. So what I want you to do is to move the ball or block. And then you want to get your legs up though. So when you bring your knees to your chest, roll up and get the legs so that they have enough height. So you're going to have a couple blocks. Let's say you can get your blocks up high. Let's just say you can try it. Because I'm a shorty, so I know this is going to be a little bit of a gamble for me, but I'm going to try it. If I fall over, then it's recorded. Okay, it could happen. So I'm going to get my legs up, and I'm going to position my legs so they're kind of over those blocks. So I know, okay, that seems architecturally pretty sound. So when I lower down my head, I'm not going to risk the sand on my shins. That could be a little dicey. I could put my sand on my belly or not any sand at all. But the sand is usually going to calm your nervous system. It's not going to stress it unless sand makes you feel claustrophobic. That's another thing that happens. So I'm going to nudge it at the very hip flexors and then let my heels just float. Now, if you feel like you're going to fall over, scoot your body a little back versus pushing into the bolster, like forward. Push it back so you're spread out a little longer. And then let your hands find relaxation either on your body or just besides your body. They're both fine. You might enjoy having just a little bit of that touch time, hand on heart space and belly space, no problem. If you have a pet nearby. So rest your eyes and feel them moving from that peeled open position to dropping back, kind of into their little orbit back to the brain. And noticing the awareness of the in-breath and the out-breath supply, regardless of the exact sensation of the body. Fill the body, support the inside environment, receiving wellness. And on the exhale, letting go completely. Make sure you're supported by your props so you can let the legs be heavy, surrendering. Now, before we shift the shape completely, explore the inhale so it's as full as it can be, but it's also an experience of the body filling up at the belly level. So the expansion of that abdomen. And as you exhale, feel the belly release back towards the spine. Inhale, belly full. And exhale back towards the spine. Now moving any sand off. Position the legs so that they guide one at a time with the knees open, the back of the knees open. Important. Circle the feet. And the back lines of energy through your spine to your brain are long. And then let's just carefully roll to a side. You might be able to gather a blanket under your seat, but find where that path of sitting on your blanket or sitting back on your heels, maybe a block between the knees is just fine. And let's bring our awareness to unite in the collective here. So since we are a group, although we're in our own little cozy homes, let your hands rest on your lap open and feel where the brain centers down towards the heart center. And the hands reach up to guide in unity at the base of the heart. Level your attention to receive wellness inside and feeling that awareness outwards to others. Inhale. And with exhalations, bowing to your heart. And gratitude. Namaste. Thank you.